In my past life, I always believed my husband did not love me. It was only because he was a young general, and I was the imperial princess given to him by the emperor. Disregarding his opinion, he saw me as a spy from the royal family, and I had no intention of explaining. Until I suddenly fell ill with a heart condition and passed away abruptly. My soul saw him shut himself in the study all day, and the walls were covered with my portraits. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to our wedding night. Facing his indifferent expression, I smiled with curved eyes. Take a closer look at me. I don't believe you don't like me. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now, the story begins. A sudden, heart-wrenching pain swept through my entire body. I gripped my skirt tightly until the excruciating pain slowly faded, finally regaining my senses from the dizziness. The overwhelming red burned my eyes. This was... What's going on? Before I could figure it out, a cautious, servile voice came from beside me. Princess, you haven't eaten all day, while the consort is still entertaining guests in the front courtyard. Allow me to serve you some snacks first. I slowly turned my head, my gaze settling on the person who had spoken. It was my chief palace maid, Jinyu. She had passed away due to illness in the second year after I married Pei Wenwei. Now she stands alive before me, as if in a dream. I slowly walked to the desk, staring at the flickering flame of the silk tree red candle, and as if possessed, I reached out my fingertip. Hiss, princess, are you crazy? Amid the chaos, a rough, slightly cold hand tightly grabbed my wrist, which had been burned by the red candle. The person came with an irresistible force, pulling me away from the edge of danger. Princess Zhaoyang, even if you are extremely dissatisfied with this marriage, there is no need to harm yourself. Neither I nor the Pei family can bear the blame for any harm to your noble self. In my ear, the person's voice was low and filled with clear displeasure as he reminded me. I widened my eyes, staring blankly at the man kneeling on one knee before the bed, tending to my wounds. The lingering tingling sensation at my fingertips clearly reminds me that this is not a nightmare. I had truly been reborn. I have returned to my wedding day with Pei Wenwei, returned to the very beginning of everything. Gazing at his familiar yet unfamiliar cold face, all the memories related to him surged in my mind like a tidal wave. In a daze, it seemed I saw that study again, filled with portraits of me. That young general, once so spirited and proud, after my death, lost all his arrogance and integrity. Day after day, he would silently gaze at my portraits, his whole being consumed by desolation. Pei Wenwei. I softly called his name, slowly reaching out my fingertips to trace the sharp, handsome lines of his face. A glistening, crystal-clear tear uncontrollably slipped from the corner of my eye. The moment I started crying, the chilling aura around the man could no longer be maintained. His face remained taut and indifferent, yet the way he wiped my tears was filled with utter helplessness. You, don't cry. I'm not blaming you. You, my husband. I called out to him softly, raised my delicate hand to cover his tear-wiping one, and leaned in toward him. Just now. Were you actually dissatisfied with this marriage arrangement? His body stiffened instantly. I blinked, stood up, and pulled him back to the table. Under the shimmering candlelight, my voice was gentle yet resolute. Young General Pei, take a good look at me. I don't believe you truly don't like me. As soon as my words fell, Pei Wenwei's expression completely changed. He stared at me with a heavy gaze, his eyes seemingly flickering with turbulent emotions. Just as complex and indistinguishable as in the previous life, I couldn't understand it back then. And by the time I did, I had already lost the chance to speak my heart. Fortunately, heaven has shown mercy, granting me a chance to live again. This affection that has spanned 2 lifetimes, I do not wish to miss a single moment of it. I slowly curved my lips into a smile, raised my hand to wrap around his neck, and whispered softly by his ear. The ancient said, "The wedding night and the success in imperial examinations are the greatest joys in life. A spring night is worth 1,000 pieces of gold. Are you sure, General Pei, you want to stand here foolishly arguing with me about right and wrong?" The next moment, an arm as hard and cold as steel tightly wrapped around my waist, its immense force sweeping me backward onto the bed. As the man loomed over me, his voice was hoarse to the extreme, laced with fury and rage. And he spoke through gritted teeth. "Zhao Ying, You chose this yourself. Wait. I used all my strength to push against his chest. Pei Wenwei's expression turned slightly cold, and he indeed stopped. Do you regret it, the nuptial wine? I struggled to utter a few words. Pei Wenwei's tense expression relaxed slightly. He propped himself up slightly, his long arm reaching toward the table, directly using his inner energy to draw the wine from the table over. I took the gourd ladle he handed over, my heart trembling slightly. In my previous life, Pei Wenwei and I misunderstood each other, thinking we were both dissatisfied with this arranged marriage, the bridal chamber, the ceremonial wine. On our wedding night, he went straight to sleep in the study. After that, I was the one left alone in the empty bedchamber night after night. While he stayed in the study, we merely maintained a superficial appearance of mutual respect and courtesy. Right up until my heart disease flared up and I passed away, I always believed he didn't love me, thank goodness. I lowered my head and drained the wine from the melon rind in one gulp. The next moment, a faint blush immediately spread across my face. Unable to hold my liquor, I stared at Pei Wenwei with drunken, hazy eyes, and only after he had also taken a drink did I muster the courage to lean in and kiss the corner of his lips. Pei, young general, I have never once regretted marrying you. Nor in my past life. Pei Wenwei's eyes darkened abruptly, his hand cupping the back of my neck as he deepened the kiss. In just a moment, the wedding dress fell to the ground. The first time in 2 lifetimes was given away just like that. Even though I was fully prepared, at that moment, I couldn't help but sob softly. What are you crying for? Pei Wenwei kissed my earlobe and asked in a hoarse voice. I tried my best to hold back my sobs. You still haven't answered me. Do you actually like? I do. He took my hand, intertwining our fingers, his tone unusually gentle. Zhao Ying, you will be my only wife, unnoticed by us. A fierce rain began to fall outside. The downpour was so sudden and violent that the newly sprouted flower buds suffered greatly under its assault, after what seemed like an eternity. The heavy rain gradually eased into a soft drizzle. The drenched flower buds slowly began to bloom, their stems and petals now glistening with vibrant, dewy freshness. The next day, when I woke up, Pei Wenwei's warmth was no longer beside me. I ran my hand over the spot where he had lain last night, pursed my lips, and felt an unusual pang of loss in my heart. Jinyu, what time is it now, Your Highness? It's already 7:15, Jinyu respectfully replied from behind the gauze curtain. Outside, servants began moving about, preparing to attend to their duties. I steadied myself before slowly rising from the bed. As I stepped down, my legs nearly gave way, and I almost stumbled forward. Princess, are you all right? Jinyu supported me, so anxious that she wanted to summon the imperial physician. I'm fine, no need to make a fuss. I patted the back of her hand to reassure her. By the time the servants finished helping me bathe and change clothes, it was already noon. Jinyu was busy preparing my meal. I stood in the courtyard, facing the direction of Pei Wenwei's study with my eyes lowered in contemplation. Do ordinary newlywed couples remain as distant as we are? On the second day of marriage, I was supposed to serve tea to my mother-in-law, but I failed to present that cup of daughter-in-law's tea in both lifetimes. In my previous life, it could still be explained by misunderstandings, but this time we had already cleared things up, so why? Could it be that Pei Wenwei regrets it? At the thought of this possibility, I couldn't help but furrow my brows. Jinyu had prepared the meal and, noticing my prolonged absence, came looking for me. Having grown up by my side, she could somewhat guess what was on my mind. Your Highness, are you missing the consort? Shall I send someone to invite him over? No need, I'll go see for myself what's keeping him so busy. I waved my hand, took her arm, and slowly walked toward the door. As we walked, I calmly instructed, pass the word along from now on. Do not call him the consort anymore. Jinyu looked puzzled. Then how should we address General Pei from now on? Just call him the young general. What if the young general gets promoted in the future? You fool, can't you just change it then? I tapped her head in annoyance. Jinyu wasn't the least bit afraid of me, giggling as she teased. It seems the princess truly has feelings for the young general. I glared at her with a flushed face, but couldn't help laughing. Yes, I truly like Pei Wenwei. As I approached the study, I was stopped by the servant in Pei Wenwei's courtyard. Your Highness, the young general is not inside right now. if he's not inside, why are you stopping me? This is a restricted area of the study. What kind of restricted area is it that I, the Empress, cannot enter? I gave him a cold glance and signaled to Jinyu with my eyes. Jinyu immediately led the others forward and restrained all the attendants. I quickly walked to the study, my fingertips just lifting when I suddenly heard a woman's suppressed sobbing from inside. My heart sank slightly. I pursed my lips and pushed the door open directly. The scene in the room came fully into view. A woman was wrapping her arms around Pei Wenwei's waist, weeping bitterly against his chest, as soon as he saw me coming. Pei Wenwei immediately stood up and forcefully pushed the woman away. It was only then that I clearly saw the woman was Liu Ruyan, the legitimate daughter of the Minister of Revenue, Liu family. If I remember correctly, she is also Pei Wenwei's cousin. In my previous life, our relationship was cold, and I only heard that he had a cousin to whom he was once engaged. She was so devoted to him that she vowed never to marry anyone else, but I never personally witnessed their affectionate scenes. If it were a past life full of misunderstandings, I might truly believe that I was the one hindering this star-crossed couple. But after staying by Pei Wenwei's side as a wandering spirit for 3 years after death, I saw this man's true heart. I believe this is a misunderstanding. I stood at the door, calmly watching the two of them, even though I hadn't done anything. Pei Wenwei's body had already tensed up. Princess, he quickly took a few steps toward me, blocking Liu Ruyan's figure. His brows slightly furrowed as he looked at me, seeming to want to speak but hesitating, probably wanting to explain. But why did he stop himself? I lowered my eyes dejectedly, raising my bandaged finger to him, and said softly with red-rimmed eyes, Pei Wenwei, it hurts. It is my fault for failing in my duty. Pei Wenwei's face instantly changed color. He nervously took my hand and led me to the couch where he rested, urgently calling for a physician. At that moment, his eyes only saw my injured hand, and Fang Liu Ruyan was completely forgotten in the back of his mind. While the physician was bandaging the wound, Jinyu opportunely mentioned that I had not eaten anything since morning. Pei Wenwei's face darkened instantly, and he shot a cold glare at the butler before ordering the servants to set up the meal in the room. It is my failure in disciplining my subordinates that has caused the princess to suffer this grievance. I glanced indifferently at the trembling butler standing to the side, pursed my lips into a faint smile, and said, since the servant shows no respect to the master, he should be replaced. Princess, please forgive me. This old servant was negligent. I beg you to spare me this once. Considering that I have served the young master for half my life, if not for merit, then at least for my hard work, the steward knelt before me, weeping and pleading for mercy. Mentioning his seniority in the general's household in his words, he was warning me that he was an old retainer of the Pei family, and if I wanted to move against him, I'd have to consider the face of the Pei family matriarch and the others. So, this whole scene was actually the Pei family's way of warning me. How truly peculiar, I thought to myself, casually saying to Pei Wenwei, in all my years, this is the first time I've seen someone turn a plea for forgiveness into a request for a reward. Don't worry, I will give you an explanation for this matter. Pei Wenwei waved a hand to the people behind him. Immediately, someone led the wailing butler away. With peace and quiet, I finally brought up the main matter. Tomorrow, you will accompany me to the palace to pay respects to His Majesty. Your humble servant, Pei Wenwei. You are already my husband. Are you sure you want to keep addressing yourself so formally and creating distance between us? It is my fault. Pei Wenwei immediately corrected himself. My expression softened slightly as I deliberately feigned anger, saying, if I cannot serve the tea as your Pei family's daughter-in-law, is it too much to ask you to accompany me into the palace to offer a cup of tea to my father? Hearing my words, Pei Wenwei finally realized something. My apologies, I was too busy and forgot about this matter. I will have someone inform my mother right away. It's already past the hour. Why bother with all this? I'm not blaming you. Pei Wenwei frowned, but I didn't want to see him blaming himself, so I simply changed the subject. What happened that kept you busy in the study so early in the morning? Pei Wenwei hesitated for a moment before telling me, there's heavy snow at the border this year. The Xiongnu suddenly increased their troops and are plundering the cities. My father's side, the situation isn't looking good. At his mention, My heart instantly tightened. I remembered, in my previous life around this time, the Xiongnu were pressing at the border. General Pei, the Minister of War, requested reinforcements of troops and provisions. For some unknown reason, the emperor withheld his response, and later, General Pei was severely wounded and passed away while intercepting the Xiongnu. After that, even the superficial mutual respect between Pei Wenwei and me became a luxury. This time, nothing has happened yet, and I must prevent such a situation from recurring. I clenched my chopsticks tightly, having secretly made up my mind. The next day, Pei Wenwei accompanied me into the palace to meet the emperor. My father, as always, was spirited and imposing. Only when facing me did he shed some of his imperial authority, revealing more of a father's affection for his daughter. After the audience with the emperor, Pei Wenwei was invited by the matron sent by the Empress Dowager to the Shokong Palace. I took this opportunity to stay and accompany my father for the meal, also hoping to use this chance to probe his attitude towards the border situation. He called me closer, took my hand, and examined me carefully. As if checking to see if I had been wronged, I was also carefully observing him. 2 lifetimes apart, and my father, the emperor, remains as spirited and wise as I remember him. In my previous life, after hearing the news of my death, my spirit followed Pei Wenwei and saw my father many times. Back then, the wise and mighty father I remembered seemed to have suffered some blow, as he had aged considerably. I had always known that he married me into the Pei family not to use me as a pawn to win over and monitor them, but Pei Wenwei only understood that much later. In this life, I want to clear up the misunderstandings, and also avoid the calamity of death. My father, the emperor, asked me in a low voice, "Yinga, do you blame me for betrothing you to Pei Wenwei?" I gently shook my head. "Father, I understand your good intentions, and I truly admire Pei Wenwei as well. So you don't need to worry that I might feel wronged." The emperor looked at me steadily, as if trying to discern whether my words came from the heart or were merely meant to comfort him. After a long while, he confided in me, "Yingying, I have countless children, but you are the only one born of your mother, the empress. She left us early, and you have no blood brothers to rely on. In the future, after I pass away," my eyes reddened, and I quickly interrupted him. "Father, you are the ruler of the world. You will surely be healthy and live a long life, 10,000 years and more." "Silly child, immortality is all a lie." Father rubbed my head, almost affectionately, and said, "You are the apple of my eye, and the Pei family has been upright and loyal for generations. Pei Wenwei is a young talent with his own integrity and a promising future. With him to protect you in the days to come, no one will dare to bully you." Listening to his instructions, I couldn't control the tears streaming down my face. I knew that in my father's heart, I was different from my other siblings. I was the only one for whom he would exhaust himself with such careful arrangements. Unfortunately, in my past life, I lost my way, unable to see clearly or break free from the predicament. Not only did I waste all his efforts, but I also made him suffer the pain of a parent burying their child. "Father, I have been unfilial. I will not let down the painstaking arrangements you've made for me. I have so many words in my heart that I cannot speak, so I can only pour them all into my emotions." I lay in my father's embrace, gathering the regrets and longing from both this life and the last, and cried my heart out. That wise and formidable monarch, who commands or before others, patted my back like the most ordinary father in the world, comforting me with the utmost patience. By the time lunch ended, my eyes were still red and swollen. Before Pei Wenwei returned, I quickly brought up the matter of increasing troops at the border. Father Emperor's expression was quite complex at the time, with a faint undercurrent of suppressed anger. Although he didn't show it in front of me, I was already certain that behind the memorial that was shelved in my previous life, there must have been some unknown secrets. When I left the palace in the evening, my eyes were still red. Pei Wenwei had been watching me all along, his usually indifferent face showing a hint of concern. "If you can't bear to leave, you can stay in the palace for a few days. The emperor dotes on you and likely won't object." "There's no need." I shook my head, took the initiative to link my arm with his, and said with a smile, "As long as he sees how deeply in love we are as a couple, he'll be at ease." Pei Wenwei's body stiffened slightly, I, watching his Adam's apple bob nervously. My heart stirred, glancing around and seeing no one, I stood on tiptoe and kissed it. Pei Wenwei's steps halted abruptly, his entire body stiffening to the extreme, his dark eyes fixed on me intensely, surging with overwhelming emotion and desire. Pei Wenwei, do you like me? He gazed at me deeply. Remaining silent, I curved my lips into a smile and suggested softly, don't call me princess anymore. I don't like it. Call me Ying. Okay. He remained silent. But his hand tightened around my waist, leading me with long strides toward the carriage. The moment I was carried into the carriage, his cold aura descended along with gentle kisses, overwhelming me completely. He was always such a cold person, yet at this moment, he burned with an intensity that was almost frightening. He held my hands tightly, our fingers interlocked. In the midst of our intimate, breathless exchange, he slowly whispered his scorching, fervent words, Ying. My heart adores you. When the carriage arrived at the general's mansion, I was so weak I could barely hold myself up. Pei Wenwei reached into a compartment in the corner of the carriage, took out a cloak, shook it open, draped it over me, carefully pulled up the hood, and then lifted me in his arms to carry me out of the carriage. Your Highness was fine just a moment ago. What happened? Should we call for a physician? Jinyu, who had been waiting by the carriage, anxiously followed along. I hid my blushing face in the cloak, my fingertips tightly clutching Pei Wenwei's lapel. Burying my face deeper into his embrace, the princess is fine, just too tired. Pei Wenwei spoke naturally as he carried me into the courtyard. As if to prove his point, he dismissed everyone directly and carried me alone into the bedroom, gently placing me on the couch where he usually rested. In an instant, Pei Wenwei's presence enveloped me from all sides, and I unconsciously clenched my fingers. Pei Wenwei, who had originally intended to step back, paused slightly, lowered his gaze to my hand clutching his lapel, and a hint of amusement flickered in his eyes. Are you nervous, princess? Hearing this, I frowned and glanced at him, as if he could understand my thoughts at this moment. He directly changed his way of addressing me. Ying, Pei Wenwei. My soft murmurs were silenced by his kiss as his lips sealed mine. After a moment of intimacy, he held my shoulder and said in a deep voice, from now on, just call me Jinyang. I looked at him in surprise. I thought he wouldn't open up to me so completely this quickly. After all, in his mind, there were ulterior motives behind the emperor's decision to marry me off to the Pei family. My reaction made him mistakenly think I was unwilling, and his originally gentle attitude instantly turned cold. Jinyang, taken from the meaning of being cautious in words and deeds, the Pei family commands the northern border army and stands out too much in the court, making them a target. My grandfather gave me this name as a warning, to always remind myself of the duty of loyalty to the sovereign. While explaining, he had already gotten out of bed and was putting on his robe, preparing to leave. Wait, I reached out and grabbed his sleeve. Pei, Jinyang, my father has never doubted the Pei family. Pei Wenwei glanced at me and said calmly, the emperor's heart is inscrutable. If he truly distrusted the Pei family, my father would not have betrothed me to you. Do you understand? Pei Wenwei curled his lips in what seemed like a mocking smile and said, for a princess of your noble status, this is indeed a grievance. You don't believe me. My eyes widened, and they gradually reddened. Pei Wenwei moved his lips but ultimately did not deny it. All right, I understand. I released his robe and let him leave, listening to the fading footsteps. My heart felt as if it were being twisted by a knife, the pain unbearable. I endured the pain and called for Jinyu, instructing her to find a loyal palace maid to fetch the imperial physician using my waist token. Do not let this matter leak out, Your Highness. Why must you suffer like this? Holding my hand, Jinyu wiped the cold sweat from my forehead with a handkerchief, her eyes reddening as she said, shall I go and summon the young general? He must be exhausting all his efforts to alleviate the crisis in the northern frontier right now. There's no need to distract his focus. Moreover, the misunderstandings between us are intertwined with court politics and differing views. It's not something that can be resolved with just a few words to make him let down his guard. After the imperial physician examined me, he prescribed a formula to calm the mind and soothe the spirit before taking his leave. In the following days, under Pei Wenwei's silence, I simply stayed and lodged directly in his courtyard. He had nowhere else to go, so he simply stayed in the study. Except when absolutely necessary, he almost never met with me, adopting a defensive posture as if to draw a clear line between us. Though I was tormented inside, I still had people keep a close watch on his movements. In recent days, many people had been coming and going from the Pei residence. Some were officials friendly with the Pei and Liu families, while others were unfamiliar faces. I knew he was maneuvering for the affairs of the northern border. So I had Jinyu deliver a letter on my behalf. Father has already made a decision regarding the northern border. We will receive news within the next few days, so there is no need to worry. The letter was sent, but it sank like a stone into the sea. Pei Wenwei does not trust me. My heart ached, but I didn't want to disturb him at such a time. I dismissed the palace attendants and lay on the bed, sulking alone. Creak. Suddenly, there was a noise at the door. I nervously turned over. Through the mosquito net, I vaguely saw a familiar figure approaching. When he was still 2 or 3 steps away from the bed, the visitor stopped and made no further movements. I didn't make a sound, just watched him quietly. I don't know how much time had passed when the night watchman's drum sounded from outside. Pei Wenwei, who had been standing like a wooden stake all night, finally moved. He lifted his hand and opened the gauze curtain. I nervously closed my eyes, pretending to still be asleep. The next moment, cool fingers brushed over my brows and eyes, lingered for a moment, then withdrew as he quietly left. My heart pounded like a drum, and my hand beneath the blanket unconsciously clenched the collar of my clothes over my chest. Hearing the sound of the door closing, I quietly slipped off the bed and ran to the window, watching his receding figure. I stood there in a daze, wondering, does he come every night, or was tonight just an exception? The next day, I received news from the palace while at the residence. The emperor was furious in the court, not only severely reprimanding the third prince and placing him under house arrest, but also immediately allocating troops and provisions to the northern border to stabilize the situation. This time, the general leading the reinforcements was Pei Wenwei. He seemed to want to tell everyone that the Pei family still held a deep place in the emperor's heart. After reading the letter, I threw it directly into the charcoal brazier and then instructed Jinyu, prepare a more discreet carriage. I will be leaving the residence shortly. Your Highness, are you going to the palace? No, I want to go see third brother. But His Majesty has just placed the third prince under house arrest and forbidden anyone from visiting. I waved my hand, telling her to just go and prepare. Before leaving, as if guided by some unseen force, I draped on Pei Wenwei's cloak. When I left the general's mansion, Pei Wenwei had already returned from court. As he rode past my carriage, I secretly lifted the curtain to glance at him. Pei Wenwei, in my past life I stood by and did nothing, which led to your father's death in the northern border. This time, whether it's you or old General Pei, I will do everything in my power to keep you both safe. Third brother was confined to his quarters, but it wasn't that difficult for me to see him. Jinyu held my waist token, and all the imperial guards stationed at the third prince's residence stepped aside to make way. Zhao Ying, I still underestimated your importance in my father's heart. At our first meeting, the third prince immediately greeted me with sarcastic and sharp words. I carefully observed him. My emotions in a state of great complexity. Third brother, in my memory, you were clearly a noble and upright gentleman, so why have you become this unfamiliar stranger I no longer recognize? Noble and upright. The third prince repeated these words, his gentle face instantly twisting into a ferocious expression. He stared at me intently, his eyes filled with jealousy and rage. Zhao Ying, I am not you. You don't have to do anything to be the revered Princess Zhaoyang. While if I don't fight and strive, there is only one path left for me, death. If you have no interest in that position and remain an idle prince, you would pose no threat to others. Why shouldn't I compete? We are all descendants of the dragon. Why should I be the one to yield? If you contended openly and honorably, I wouldn't say a single word against it. But why did you have to betray your country? What are you talking about? How could you? No, I don't know what you're referring to. The third prince's expression shifted repeatedly, his gaze towards me changing from envy and resentment to wariness, with murderous intent flashing in the blink of an eye. Watching his hand slowly move behind his back, I felt a pang of disappointment, even though I had long suspected it. Facing the real him in this moment still brought a wave of sorrow. So-called flesh and blood, after all, cannot compare to the temptation of the imperial throne. I directly had people come in and take away the weapon he was preparing to use for the attack. Pinned down in the chair by the people I brought, unable to move, he could only turn his anger toward me. Zhao Ying, I am your brother. How dare you let these lowly servants defy their superiors? I shook my head in disappointment, slowly walked up to him, and looked down at him from above, secretly colluding with the Xiongnu, selling the border defense map, and withholding the memorials from the northern frontier. Third brother, the crimes you've committed, even father wouldn't be able to cover them up. When you reach the underworld, you can apologize one by one to those wronged souls. With that, I turned and walked away without another word. After leaving the third prince's residence, I immediately went to visit my maternal grandfather and handed over the evidence I had gathered from the third prince's estate. Grandfather, it's not appropriate for me to handle these matters personally. The lives of the hundreds of thousands of troops at the border and General Pei's safety are now entrusted to you. 2 days later, the news that the third prince had colluded with the Xiongnu and betrayed the country to the enemy completely shattered the court in Yangjing. When Pei Wenwei hurried back, I was brewing tea in the courtyard. He walked straight up to me, snatched the teacup from my hand, his expression stern. Was it you? I blinked, lying without changing my expression. What are you talking about? I don't know. On the day the third prince was confined to his quarters, you sneaked out of the mansion. So what? Father confined him. But he didn't say I couldn't go out. MMPH. Pei Wenwei leaned in directly and sealed my lips. His actions both urgent and furious. I had no strength to resist, my fingers clutching at his robe, lost in the throes of passion. The kiss came urgently, and when it ended, there was a lingering reluctance to part. You shouldn't have put yourself in danger. Pei Wenwei held my waist tightly, his expression dark and heavy. I raised an eyebrow at him. Were you worried about me? The moment our eyes met, Pei Wenwei seemed to snap out of his daze and tried to let go of me to stand up and leave. Pei Jinyang, you stop right there, I shouted sharply. Pei Wenwei's figure paused. I walked around to face him with a stern expression, looking at him coldly. Pei Wenwei, you say you have feelings for me, yet you deliberately act cold and push me away. What do you take me for? I'm sorry, princess. Are you afraid that I'm using you? I hit the nail on the head, exposing his concerns. Pei Wenwei's expression shifted slightly. No, there's no need for you to deny it. I understand you better than you understand yourself. After all, we've been husband and wife for 2 lifetimes now. I took a step forward, almost pressing up against him. I grabbed his hand and placed it over my heart, my voice steady and resolute. Pei Wenwei, Zhao Ying, swear to heaven, if I harbor even the slightest ill intent toward you, may I be struck by lightning. A cold kiss once again stole my breath and the rest of my vow. This time, after releasing me, he directly swept me up into his arms and strode swiftly back to the bedroom. Pei Jinyang, what are you doing? It's still daytime. I grabbed his fingers that were trying to tear open my collar and sat up to get off the bed. Pei Wenwei leaned in directly, blocking my lips with his, guiding my hand to slowly undo his belt. Neglecting you was my fault. Saying things I didn't mean was my fault. Letting you take risks for me yet still doubting you was even more my fault. I've been so terribly wrong. I clearly deserve to die 1,000 deaths, but I can't bear to. Ying, tomorrow I will lead the army north. And right now I don't want to be apart from you for even a moment. Listening to his heartfelt words that were almost like self-revelation, my originally resistant body gradually relaxed. Pei Wenwei took the opportunity to lower the gauze curtain, gently holding me as he invited me with a series of tender, lingering kisses to join him in this intimate union. That night, we slept nestled close, our necks entwined. It was the most peaceful night's sleep I had experienced in both of my lifetimes. Pei Wenwei rose with the utmost care, yet I still awoke. Ying, sleep a little longer. He lowered his head and planted a kiss on my forehead. I shook my head, enduring the soreness and weariness throughout my body as I got up. Taking the belt handed by the palace maid, I fastened it for him myself. I want to see you off. The weather is chilly outside. I feel so relieved knowing you're staying home. I smiled without saying a word, straightened his robes for him. and personally saw him out of the residence. After returning, I immediately summoned attendants to help me freshen up, then hurried to take a carriage outside the city. Although he was unwilling, I still wanted to see him off personally. They say on the battlefield, blades and arrows have no eyes. I wanted to tell him, be careful of the swords and spears, for I am still here in Yangjing City, waiting for his safe and triumphant return. When I rode the carriage out of the city gate, the sky outside had just a sliver of light. Taking advantage of the last bit of darkness at dawn, I stopped the carriage on the route the army was bound to take. Watching Pei Wenwei depart from afar, he rode a tall horse at the very front of the procession. Suddenly, he turned his head and looked in the direction where I was standing, as if sensing my presence. He suddenly turned his horse and galloped toward me. I widened my eyes, staring blankly as his figure became clearly visible in my line of sight. The carriage's windproof curtain was forcefully pulled aside. A man clad in general's armor, carrying a chill about him, leaned into the carriage and pressed toward me like an unyielding fortress, giving me a lingering, passionate kiss. He held me in his arms, using his cool fingertip to carefully wipe away the smudged rouge and moisture from my lips. His voice filled with endless tenderness and affection. Ying, I've wronged you during these first days of our marriage. Wait for me at home, all right? With glistening eyes, I gazed at him, reached up to remove a jade pendant from my neck, and personally fastened it around his. Then, I draped over his shoulders the cloak he had left with me. The northern frontier winds are fierce. Take care of yourself. This object will protect your safety. I await your triumphant return in Yangjing City. After you return, will you promise me a lifetime together? I promise you a lifetime together. The army advanced at a rapid marching pace, and in less than half an hour, the official road became quiet and deserted once again. Your Highness, are you ready to return? Jinyu asked softly from outside the carriage. I composed myself and replied, let's go back. After returning to the general's residence, just as I had finished breakfast, Pei Wenwei's mother suddenly sent someone to summon me. This old lady, since I married into the Pei family, has been as if she vanished into thin air, only making a brief appearance on the second day after the wedding. Now, as soon as Pei Wenwei left home, she suddenly sent someone to invite me. No matter how I look at it, it seems like she has ill intentions. I was just pondering in my heart, but Jinyu directly expressed her dissatisfaction. Your Highness, you are a princess. Even though you married the young general, you are still of noble status. Even if that person is the young general's mother, the etiquette should not be like this. If it were in the princess's residence, they would have to send a formal request first to meet. Alright, I know you're upset on my behalf, but the young general has just led the army north. Let's not cause trouble at a time like this. Jinyu, but, I raised an eyebrow and said bluntly, with my temperament, who could possibly take advantage of me? Only then did Jinyu breathe a sigh of relief. The servant supporting me to follow Lady Pei. Lady Pei's courtyard is located away from the main residence. I heard it's for quiet meditation and practicing Buddhist vegetarianism. We walked for a quarter of an hour before reaching her courtyard. As soon as I stepped inside, I saw a familiar figure here. It was the butler who had offended me before. At that time, Pei Wenwei had him dragged away and made his stance clear on the spot, so I didn't pursue the matter further. I never expected that he had been spared by Lady Pei. When he saw me, the butler showed a disrespectful smile and said in a firm tone, Your Highness, the madam wishes to see you alone. Jinyu's expression turned cold. You insolent fool, who do you think you are, daring to speak to Her Highness in such a manner? Your Highness, please forgive me. This old servant is merely relaying a message. I trust that Your Highness, being wise and magnanimous, will not stoop to my level. The butler offered an insincere apology while stepping aside to make a path just wide enough for one person. Jinyu was indignant and wanted to scold him further, but I stopped her. I smiled and followed him, saying, You wanted to see me, didn't you? Lead the way. Seeing that I truly had no intention of bringing anyone with me, a flicker of regret crossed the butler's face. Then, she took me to the small Buddhist hall. Here, I saw another familiar face. Greetings, Your Highness. It's been a long time since we last met. Liu Ruyan curtsied to me with a delicate, willow-like grace, her posture so respectful that no fault could be found, but, I nodded slightly and looked at the woman who was chanting scriptures with her eyes closed in front of the Buddha statue. Is this Pei Wenwei's mother? I had never met her in my previous life, but it seems she's also not an easy person to deal with. While I was still pondering in my heart, Lady Pei had already opened her eyes. Gazing at me with a faint, stern tone, "Kneel, kneel," I raised an eyebrow, finally feeling a hint of ambiguity. I wonder who Lady Pei wants this princess to kneel to. I deliberately emphasized the words "this princess is" and, as expected, saw two slightly changed expressions. After a moment of silence, Lady Pei spoke in a low, cold, and rigid tone. "It is a grave sin to see the Buddha and not kneel." "Oh, so now you're even pinning a crime on me." My eyebrows arched even higher. I strode over to the front of the Buddha statue, looking down at her from above, and casually began recounting a past incident. When I was 2 years old, my mother passed away due to illness. The emperor, deeply missing my mother and fearing that I, at such a young age, having suffered this misfortune, might long for my mother so intensely as to follow her in death, specially conferred upon me the title of Princess Jiaoyang, so that I would have something to remember her by. As such, I am not required to kneel or pay respects to anyone. With that, I shifted the tone of my words, and my voice turned cold as well. I have been showered with the imperial family's favor and honor. A mere statue of Buddha, do you expect me to kneel before it? Does Lady Pei believe it surpasses the ruler of the world? As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere in the small prayer hall instantly froze to the extreme. I observed this, my smile unchanged, and took the initiative to break the silence. I heard that Lady Pei once arranged a marriage for the young general. Lady Pei remained silent for a long time before slowly replying, "That is correct. This Miss Liu is indeed a lovely person, but it's a pity her affections are misplaced. From now on, please refrain from visiting the general's manor without reason. I cannot tolerate any impropriety in my sight, nor do I wish for any rumors to spread in the future." Liu Ruyan flushed red with anger and retorted unwillingly, "Your Highness, even though you are a princess, I'm afraid you cannot control what I think and feel in my heart." Liu Ruyan tightly gripped Lady Pei's arm, putting on the appearance of someone who had suffered endless bullying, looking utterly heartbroken. Lady Pei frowned deeply and looked at me with displeasure. "Your Highness, Ruyan is my niece," leaving aside that blood ties are hard to sever at this moment. "She has not offended you in any way, but I don't like her, and that's reason enough." Madame Pei's face darkened. Since ancient times, the Emperor's heart has been the most difficult to fathom, while the Pei family currently enjoys His Majesty's favor. Should any discord arise between us, I'm afraid your standing before the Emperor might not remain so favorable. I maintained my smile, yet my voice carried a chilling, murderous undertone. Liu Ruyan's face turned pale as she clung to Madame Pei's arm. "Aunt, I didn't." Madame Pei's eyes flashed with terror. She stared at me for a long time, as if finally making a choice, then closed her eyes with great difficulty. Liu Ruyan seemed to realize something. Her face deathly pale as she collapsed weakly onto the ground. I calmly glanced at Lady Pei, who had chosen to protect herself by staying out of trouble, and felt a trace of pity for her. At the same time, I found it ironic. The Pei family had always been known for their integrity, and Pei Wenwei was such an outstanding man. Who would have thought his mother would turn out to be such a cunning character? Watching Lady Pei, who had already resumed chanting scriptures and praying, I curled my lips slightly and took the initiative to speak, making the decision for her. "Someone, see the guest out." When Liu Ruyan was taken away, crying and screaming for help, Lady Pei still remained silent, as if she hadn't heard a thing. "Since my lady enjoys fasting and chanting Buddhist scriptures, from now on, when you have nothing to do, you should spend more time in your room reciting sutras to calm your mind." As I walked out, I casually issued the final order. As I walked through the courtyard, the steward who had been ordered to repeatedly provoke me was no longer there. I had no concern for the fate he rightfully deserved. Pei Wenwei and I, having endured 2 lifetimes, were finally seeing signs of a happy ending. No one could stand in our way, not even his birth mother. Don't like it? Then let her never come out again. The long winter passed swiftly because there was something to look forward to. When withered trees sprouted new branches and the sky shed soft spring rain, news of victory came from the northern border. Pei Wenwei led 100,000 troops to crush the Xiongnu, pursued them all the way to their royal city, and slaughtered the entire group of ambitious foreign bandit nobles who had been coveting the Yang kingdom. On the day Pei Wenwei led his army back to the capital, the peach grove in the suburbs happened to be in full bloom. I stood under a peach tree by the roadside, smiling as I welcomed him home. Months apart had tempered him in the harsh northern winds, making him even more stern and cold. His blood-stained black armor faintly reflected a chilling sharpness. The moment our eyes met, he spurred his tall steed and galloped straight toward me. The galloping horse slowed to a halt a few meters away from me. He dismounted amidst the fierce neighing of his horse and strode quickly toward me, the overwhelming aura of murderous intent dissipating completely just 2 or 3 meters away. As he drew near, he raised his hand and threw a cloak over me, covering me from head to face. The next moment, he ducked under the umbrella, leaned in, and pressed a gentle kiss to my lips. Ying, I've come to fulfill my promise. I reached out and took his hand, a smile shining in my eyes. Welcome home. The great army returned in triumph, and the emperor held a banquet in the palace. Pei Wenwei, as one of the main generals who had distinguished himself in this campaign, naturally could not be absent, but after meeting by the peach grove, he was unwilling to let go of my hand again. I had no choice but to change into a splendid palace gown and attend the banquet with him. After a round of rewarding merits, Pei Wenwei successfully shed the title of junior and was appointed as the general of Agile Cavalry. After Pei Wenwei received the imperial decree and expressed his gratitude, the court officials looked at him with even greater enthusiasm. At just 20 years old, the young general was deeply favored by the emperor, with a future full of promise, and was a rare choice for a husband. Thinking of this, I slightly lowered my gaze and clenched my fingertips. Don't grip so tightly, or you'll hurt yourself. A slightly cool, large hand suddenly reached from my side, its slender and strong fingers forcibly prying open my clenched fist. Then interlacing with mine in a tight clasp, I froze for a moment, then turned to look at him. Jinyang, as if he knew I was feeling jealous, he said firmly, in this lifetime, I will only have Zhao Ying as my wife. I froze again, then suddenly laughed, and all the bitterness in my heart vanished completely. Just now, I had mistakenly fallen into confusion again, knowing full well the depth of his affection, yet still doubting him so much I was not firm enough. Jinyang, thank you. I feel the same way. Pei Wenwei curved his lips into a smile, reached out, and pulled me into his embrace. After the palace banquet, our father summoned us alone. He probably saw our closeness during the feast, and his attitude toward Pei Wenwei became a bit more cordial. After giving him a series of earnest admonitions, he finally allowed us to leave the palace. On the way back to the residence, I brought up old General Pei, who hadn't been able to return to the capital with the army this time. Is General Pei also returning soon? Once the court has capable individuals to guard the northern frontier, Father will submit a request to retire and return to farming. After Pei Wenwei finished speaking, he suddenly tightened his grip on my hand. From what I observe of His Majesty's intentions, he wants me to take on the responsibility of commanding the northwestern forces. If that time truly comes, would Ying be willing to go with me to the northern border? He stared at me intently, a flicker of barely noticeable tension and anticipation in his eyes. I looked surprised, my eyes fixed on his bobbing Adam's apple, and for a moment, I didn't speak. Pei Wenwei waited a moment before shaking his head slowly, his expression slightly dimmed. Forget it, the northern frontier is cold and barren, terribly dull. I can't bear to see you suffer there. You, with your delicate upbringing, are better off staying in Yangjing. I can come back to visit you. He spoke with such openness. Yet I could hear a hint of loss in his words. My heart ached, and I gripped his hand in return. It doesn't matter if the weather is cold and the ground is frozen, as long as I'm with you. I never feel bored. Pei Wenwei suddenly turned to look at me, his usually indifferent face showing a flicker of excitement. Ying, you, Jinyang, you should have some confidence in me. I reached out and embraced him, my voice soft yet resolute. You are my husband, and of course I will follow you. Whether it's the northern frontier or any corner of the world, I am willing to go with you. Pei Wenwei's response was to hold me even tighter, with such force that it felt as if he wanted to meld me into his very bones and blood. At this moment, I suddenly understood why Lady Pei was so quiet within the Pei family. And why her relationship with Pei Wenwei was so cold and awkward. It must be that 20 years ago, she had faced the exact same choice as I do now, only, amid the dazzling allure of Yangjing and the bleak, perilous northern frontier, she chose the former, and Pei Wenwei, whose responsibilities were predetermined at birth, had followed old General Pei away from Yangjing back then. From then on, home was in the northwest, while the Pei residence in Yangjing became a distant memory. And his mother turned into a mere unfamiliar symbol in his life. "My lord," I called out to him softly, holding him tightly with a heart full of pain. "Don't be afraid, my lord. This time, no one will abandon you again. Ever since the day I was reborn, I have been paying close attention to my heart condition. Exhausting all power and wealth, I invited several skilled imperial physicians and folk doctors to examine me. They all said that as long as I take good care of myself and pay attention to emotional fluctuations, I would not develop a heart condition. In this life, I will no longer suffer a sudden heart attack." After returning to the Pei residence, Pei Wenwei led me into the study. As soon as I entered, I noticed something different about the inner room. In my memory, those portraits that were supposed to be hung only after my death have already been put up now, 5 years ago. "By the peach grove in the outskirts of the capital, I saw you once." "What?" I looked at him in surprise. "That was the first time I returned to the capital with my father after going to the northwest. We took shelter in a mountain villa due to heavy rain. At that time, you were standing under the peach tree in the villa holding a prayer rope. The pink peach blossoms covering the mountains were not as dazzling as you. With just one glance, you were imprinted in my heart." When he mentioned it, I did have a slight impression. That time I left the palace, I went to Guanglu Temple to pray for my late mother's upcoming Memorial Day. Unexpectedly, it suddenly started pouring rain on my way down the mountain, so I took shelter from the rain at a manor on the mountainside. After pondering for a moment, I suddenly smiled and said, "If we had known each other back then, perhaps we would have gotten married even earlier." Pei Wenwei shook his head. "No, the timing now is just perfect." "You met me at a time when I had already learned how to love you, so the timing was just right." As he spoke, he pulled me into his embrace and slowly began recounting the events he had experienced over the years. He also mentioned how, in a family letter sent to the northwest last year, Lady Pei had unilaterally arranged his marriage to Liu Ruyan without consulting anyone. His words tinged with a faint sense of disgust. I pursed my lips, leaning quietly against his chest as I listened. Refraining from offering any understanding words to persuade him to forgive, I truly do not like this mother-in-law of mine, nor can I bring myself to respect her. After he completely opened up to me about the past, there was truly no more reservation between us. Pei Wenwei said he would make up for the grievances I suffered during the first few days of our marriage, and he kept his word. At the end of that year, he took me to the northwest, at the general's mansion. He formally paid his respects to his father. The cup of daughter-in-law tea that was never raised before was finally offered to the most important person. From then on, with heaven and earth as our witness, we would never part until our hair turned white. And so the first story ends. What do you all think? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed it, please give this video a like. Now, here's the second story. I and my legitimate elder sister married the crown prince one after the other. I am the principal wife, and she is the secondary wife. It so happened that we both became pregnant at the same time, and we thought we would both add children to the crown prince's household simultaneously. Unexpectedly, on the day of childbirth, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The crown prince's household celebrated for 3 days, with the sounds of music and strings continuing day and night. I gave birth to a stillborn child, was humiliated and cursed by the crown prince, and was then forced to drink red-crowned crane poison by my legitimate sister. "You lowly concubine-born daughter, allowing you to bear the crown prince's child was already my greatest mercy. I struggled in vain, and in the end, died with blood flowing from all 7 orifices. Only after death did I learn that the stillborn child was actually my legitimate sister's. Her body was fundamentally unfit for childbirth. When I opened my eyes again, I had actually returned to the day of childbirth. Brother Crown Prince, The little one in my belly is quite the mischievous one, kicking so hard it hurts. I heard my legitimate sister's affected laughter and knew I had been reborn. She nestled delicately against the crown prince, pulling his hand to rest on her belly. Her eyes shimmered with emotion as she cooed incessantly about how restless the child inside her was. I looked at her rigid belly without the slightest ripple, secretly sneering. Can a dead fetus still kick your belly? It really is mischievous. However, I didn't expose my elder sister's lie. Instead, I smiled at the crown prince and said, "Husband, the baby in sister's belly must be a boy. Our crown prince's residence will soon have double blessings." Hearing this, the crown prince laughed heartily, and my elder sister shyly buried her face in his embrace. But I clearly saw the hint of pride and calculation in my elder sister's eyes, so obvious, so arrogant, yet in my past life I hadn't noticed it at all. Both Jiang Yuerong and I are daughters of the Guardian General. She is the legitimate daughter, while I am the illegitimate one. At first, my father did not think highly of the fourth prince, who was not favored. His mother had passed away early, and he had been raised under the Empress's care, since the Empress had her own legitimate son. He had no chance of standing out, but my father feared that one day the Emperor might value him, so he married me off to him first. However, after 3 years of marriage, my belly showed no sign of movement. It wasn't until the crown prince's unexpected death that the fourth prince was appointed as the crown prince. Later, after the fourth prince became the crown prince, my father, envious of the crown prince's influence, arranged for my elder sister to marry into the crown prince's residence as a concubine. Not long after I became pregnant, I excitedly shared the news with the crown prince, but he only laughed and said, "What a coincidence. Yuerong is also carrying my child. You two really are sisters." Even getting pregnant at the same time, after my elder sister and I both became pregnant, soon it was time to give birth. Exhausted, I labored for a full day and night before finally delivering the baby, only to find it was stillborn. Meanwhile, my sister joyfully gave birth to a healthy son. The crown prince's residence celebrated for 3 days, with the sounds of music and strings continuing day and night. Yet I, having given birth to a stillborn child, was humiliated and cursed by the crown prince, and then forced to drink red-crowned crane poison by my legitimate sister. In my previous life, after I died, my soul lingered in the harem. By chance, I overheard a conversation between my legitimate sister and her confidant, and only then did I learn of all the conspiracies. It turned out that the stillborn child was actually my legitimate sister's. She had long known her body was unfit for childbirth, which is why, after entering the mansion, she set her sights on me. Coincidentally, she became pregnant at the same time as I did, making it even more convenient for her to switch the babies and pin the blame of giving birth to a stillborn on me. Afterward, she used a bottle of poison to silence me forever. Was this still the same legitimate sister who had always treated me with such affection since childhood? All these years, I never knew her heart was as venomous as a snake's. Watching her nestled in the crown prince's arms, intimate and affectionate as if no one else was around, how could I not hate her? In my past life, it was in the evening, right after drinking the miscarriage-preventing medicine sent by my legitimate elder sister, that my labor suddenly began. At that moment, I was in a complete panic, only knowing to cry out in pain, without noticing that all the maids and matrons around me had been replaced by my elder sister's trusted followers, and those midwives and imperial physicians were all arranged by my elder sister. I trusted her completely and had no suspicions whatsoever. This led to me having no trusted aides by my side during childbirth, allowing them to effortlessly swap my child. In this life, I can no longer sit idly by like this. I must make all necessary arrangements before giving birth. I immediately picked up my brush, wrote a note, and tucked it into a piece of date paste square cake. I called my personal maid Xianyun and repeatedly instructed her to personally deliver this box of pastries into the hands of the Empress. Remember, you must remind Her Majesty that this date paste square cake is her favorite and should be eaten while it's hot. It won't be good once it cools down. The Crown Prince had not yet established his own separate residence and still lived in the Imperial Palace, which was also the Empress's wish. Perhaps it was the Crown Prince kept right under her watch that was easier to manipulate. In my previous life, The empress had also placed great importance on the child in my womb. She would frequently send over the finest tonics, Nula tribute fabrics from Jiangnan, or precious jewels and ornaments, all things that someone of my status should not have received. Occasionally, she would even condescend to visit my humble courtyard, carrying herself without the slightest air of an empress. But she never went to see her legitimate sister. At most, she would only reward her with some ordinary gold, silver, and jewels when her legitimate sister went to pay respects to the empress. The crown prince had once hinted to the empress that she was being partial, but the empress merely smiled and casually told him, Jiang Yuan, like me, comes from a concubine-born background. Seeing her cautious and timid demeanor reminds me of my younger self, so naturally, I feel closer to her. Moreover, after she married you, she suffered such great grievances. When I reward her, it is to make her grateful to the imperial family and not resent you. This struck a sore spot for the crown prince, and naturally, he dared not say anything more, but I knew the empress had deeper intentions behind this gesture. Yet in my previous life, I had failed to grasp them, and as my soul wandered through the palace, I uncovered another astonishing secret. This was also the bargaining chip I used to actively seek the empress's protection. I just don't know if this small piece of jujube paste cake will be enough to make the empress choose to keep me safe. I didn't wait for Her Majesty the Queen's carriage, but instead received fertility medicine delivered by my legitimate elder sister. Looking at that pitch-black medicinal brew, I suddenly remembered that in my past life, this bowl of soup, named pregnancy-preserving medicine, was actually a labor-inducing potion that took my life. In my past life, I was still half a month away from my normal delivery date, yet shortly after I drank this bowl of medicine, I went into labor. It turned out that the dead fetus of my sister could no longer be delayed and had to be induced immediately in order to save her life. In her anxiety, she bribed the imperial physician to prescribe me labor-inducing medicine, also that we would give birth at the same time and she could swap the children. As I stared at this bowl of black medicinal brew, it was as if I could see the deep, cold palace of my past life, covered in cobwebs and crawling with rats and insects. I clenched my fists tightly, letting my fingertips dig painfully into my palms, just to suppress the urge to knock it over. The medicine is too hot. Wait a bit before drinking it. The maid of my legitimate elder sister, Inga, frowned deeply and scolded me loudly without any regard for status. This is what our side consort instructed to be drunk immediately. Once the medicine cools, it loses its efficacy. Crown Princess, please drink it quickly, I sneered coldly. Of course it had to be drunk immediately. The longer Jiang Yuerong's fetus stayed in her womb, the more danger she was in. I stared at this arrogant girl before me and suddenly remembered how, in my past life, after I was sent to the cold palace, she had ruthlessly slapped me. She had also taken advantage of her master's power to bully me, calling me a lowly concubine-born daughter, only to turn around and fawn over Jiang Yuerong like a lapdog. I steadied my restless stomach and coldly ordered the maid, Inga has been disrespectful to me, smash her mouth for me. The maid had long been fed up with Inga's usual arrogance and domineering attitude, but she held back because of my gentle nature, never bothering to argue with her. Now, with my instruction, she stepped forward, raised her hand, and slapped Inga hard across the face. Inga screamed, covering her face, and stared at me with wide eyes, her gaze filled with fury. I am the most capable maid of the side consort. How dare you have someone hit me? I curled my lips mockingly. So you do know you're just a maid? My eyes suddenly turned sharp. A lowly servant daring to offend her superior, drag her away and give her 50 lashes. Beat her hard. I never intended to take her life, but some people just can't wait to throw it away. 2 sturdy maidservants dragged Inga away, and soon, blood-curdling screams echoed from outside. I picked up that bowl of labor-inducing medicine and slowly poured it into the spittoon beside me, then placed my hand on my belly and whispered softly, "Don't be afraid, my darling, with your mother here in this lifetime, no one will ever take you away again." Just as Auriel's desperate screams were gradually weakening, the crown prince's furious roar erupted. "The consort is almost dying from pain. What are you howling about here, you lowly slave?" Auriel scrambled on her knees to clutch the crown prince's robe, weeping incessantly, "Your Highness, save me. The crown princess is taking her anger out on me and wants to beat me to death. The old women had used brutal force, her waist and buttocks were already a bloody mess. If the crown prince had arrived a moment later, she would certainly have lost her life. Supported by my maid, I slowly walked out, holding my belly, with a face full of grievance. "Your Highness." This maid spoke rudely and showed disrespect to me. It doesn't matter if I suffer grievances, but the little prince in my belly cannot endure such disrespect. Seeing the crown prince's expression soften, I continued, "In half a month, I will give birth. If something goes wrong now, it would mean 2 lives lost." The crown prince's pupils contracted sharply as he glanced at Inga, who was barely breathing, and coldly ordered, "Since she has offended the crown princess, execute her immediately and drag her away. Don't soil the crown princess's courtyard." Inga stared at the crown prince in disbelief, but it was already too late to beg for mercy. Looking at the 2 trails of blood dragged across the courtyard, I suddenly remembered that in my previous life, I must have ended up just like her, after death, dragged out of the cold palace like a dog, casually discarded in a mass burial ground, left to be devoured by wild beasts. The crown prince barely suppressed the anxiety in his heart, his gaze fixed on my belly. "Did you drink the calming medicine Reborn gave you? How are you feeling now?" I thought he didn't know the truth, so I nodded obediently. "Sister has been so concerned about me, and even sent such fine medicine." Of course I drank it as soon as possible. The crown prince nodded, but the look he gave me was clearly filled with anxiety and impatience. He was pacing back and forth in the room, and I thought he was worried about his sister, so I tried to comfort him with a few words, but instead of easing his emotions, he became even more agitated. I sighed inwardly. It was clear that he cared the most about his legitimate sister. Suddenly, a maid rushed in a panic. "Your Highness, it's terrible. The consort is having a difficult labor. She's lost so much blood. The imperial physician says we can't wait any longer." The crown prince shot to his feet. Frantic with worry like an ant on a hot pan, he suddenly turned to look at me, his gaze cold and piercing, sending chills down my spine. "Jiang, did you really drink that bowl of miscarriage-inducing medicine?" A flicker of unease and surprise crossed my heart. I frowned and retorted, "Why isn't your Highness concerned about my sister's health, but so fixated on my bowl of miscarriage-preventing medicine?" A cold glint flashed in the crown prince's eyes. It seemed he had guessed something, and he scrutinized me carefully. "You really didn't drink it?" He sneered coldly and suddenly reached out to grab my chin. "You're very clever. That was indeed not a fetal stabilizing medicine, but a labor-inducing drug." My pupils contracted sharply as I stared at him in shock, feeling as if all the fragmented pieces in my mind had suddenly snapped together. "I want you to give birth immediately to relieve Yuerong's urgent crisis." The crown prince's gaze gradually turned wild. "Do you think that by not drinking that medicine, I have no way to make you give birth to the child right now?" Guards, the imperial physician, who had been waiting in the outer chamber, hurriedly entered. The crown prince threw me violently onto the bed, his eyes filled with ferocity and venom. "Cut open her belly. Take that child out for me." I was stunned for a moment, staring at him in disbelief. "Crown Prince, what do you mean by this?" Before I could finish speaking, I suddenly understood. No wonder Jiang Yuerong dared to frame me right here in the imperial palace. No wonder she could bribe so many maids and servants. Even the imperial physicians obeyed her commands, so the crown prince was fully aware of everything she had done. In my previous life, it was the 2 of them who conspired to kill my child. Why? My eyes were bloodshot, and my body trembled uncontrollably. "I am the crown princess. I am the wife you personally came to marry." The crown prince looked down at me from above, his laughter cold and merciless. "You lowly commoner, how dare you aspire to be my wife?" He turned and glared fiercely at the imperial physician, shouting sharply, "Hurry up and do it. If Yuerong comes to harm, I'll have your head immediately." The physician obeyed. Drawing a sharp knife and approaching me step by step, I covered my stomach and retreated repeatedly. "You are the crown prince. This is outright murder. So what if I kill you?" The crown prince's face twisted viciously. "She's just a low-born illegitimate daughter. Her life isn't worth regretting." I wasn't aware the crown prince held such contempt for illegitimate daughters. A dignified, calm voice rang out, startling everyone in the room. The moment I heard that voice, I finally felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted. Sure enough, she came. A flash of anxiety and malice crossed the Crown Prince's eyes, but he had no choice but to kneel and pay his respects. "Why has Mother Empress come?" The Empress spoke with a serious face, telling a lie. "I heard the Crown Prince's concubine was having a difficult labor, so I came specifically to check. I haven't gone there yet, but I see your courtyard is quite lively as well." The Queen glanced at my deathly pale face, then looked at the trembling imperial physician kneeling on the ground, her voice growing even colder. "Physician Wang, did I not assign you to care for the Crown Prince's concubine? How dare you abandon your post without permission? What are you doing here?" I. Physician Wang trembled even more violently, unable to utter a single complete sentence. It seems that Physician Wang is getting old and his memory is failing. In that case, the Empress looked down upon the humble, stooped figure before her powerful aura fully displayed. "From today onward, you may retire and return to your hometown." Physician Wang broke out in a cold sweat. Never expecting that he would be able to keep his lowly life within the depths of the palace, he repeatedly kowtowed in gratitude. The Empress shifted her gaze away with disdain. "The Crown Princess is too frightened and needs rest. Attendants, escort the Crown Princess to my bedchamber. I will personally care for her until she gives birth." The Crown Prince abruptly looked up, his eyes filled with astonishment. Just as he was about to voice his objection, he saw the Empress looking at him with profound meaning. "The Crown Prince need not thank me, whether noble or common. The children in their wombs are all of the royal bloodline, and we cannot afford any mishaps. Even if this matter were brought before His Majesty, he would approve of my decision." This was clearly telling the Crown Prince. "Even if you go to the Emperor to complain, I am determined to take charge of this matter." Seeing the Crown Prince struggling to speak, the Empress slowly rose and walked straight toward the door. "Crown Prince, accompany me to visit the Crown Prince's concubine." I watched as the Empress walked out with calm composure, and the heart that had been in my throat finally settled back into place, but I sensed a venomous gaze piercing toward me. I turned my gaze and met the prince's fierce eyes. "Jiang Yuan, you've actually learned to be clever." I smiled faintly, neither humble nor pushy. "Your Highness, take care. If my elder sister gives birth safely, please convey my congratulations to her on my behalf." The Crown Prince's eyes suddenly narrowed, a fierce and cruel light exploding from their depths. But he dared not disobey the Empress, so he could only flick his sleeve and storm off in anger. It wasn't until several maids and matrons helped me out of the room that I saw the warm sunlight pouring down. It felt as if I hadn't seen such a radiant sky in many years. A heart finally relaxed. I have ultimately changed the fate of my previous life, but this is not enough. Those who killed me, humiliated me, and trampled on me, I will surely make them suffer tenfold, 100-fold retribution. That night, my door was knocked upon. I got up to open the door, and the Empress was somewhat surprised to see me standing there fully dressed. "You're not asleep yet." I smiled and invited the Empress inside. "I knew your Majesty would come tonight, so I've been waiting in my room." During the day, I had slipped that note into the date paste cake and specifically instructed the maid to emphasize that it was the Empress's favorite pastry, but the Queen simply doesn't like to eat it. She personally told me this once when she visited my courtyard. How could I possibly forget? With her intelligence, she would surely realize there was something unusual about this plate of pastries, and naturally discover the clue I left to seek help. And the note was very clear, with just a few short words. "For years ago." It was no accident. The Queen gave me an approving glance, walked to the table, and sat down, deciding to be straightforward with me. "Are you certain that what happened 4 years ago was an accident?" I heard it with my own ears. The Queen's fist, resting on the table, clenched, and her usually upright spine trembled slightly. Her eyes were already filled with a chilling coldness. I always felt back then that my son's fall from the horse was suspicious. But no matter how I investigated, I couldn't find any clues. I never expected it truly wasn't an accident. I stood beside the Empress, lowering my gaze in silence. The son she spoke of was naturally the former Crown Prince, who had fallen from his horse years ago and died from his injuries. 4 years ago, during the royal hunt, the former Crown Prince had entered the hunting grounds alone on his horse, but he never returned even after dark. By the time his body was found, Only a torn and mangled corpse remained, with even the internal organs completely hollowed out. The empress fainted on the spot. After investigating the case, the Delhi temple reported. The former crown prince's mutilated body bore numerous bite marks from wild wolves, and the scene only contained the chaotic paw prints of wolves, with no trace of any human presence. They followed those paw prints, but they disappeared after passing through a forest of fallen leaves. They analyzed that it was likely a sudden appearance of wolves that startled the horses, causing the former crown prince to fall from his horse and, by unfortunate coincidence, be attacked by the wolves, leading to his tragic death. However, how could so many wild wolves have entered the royal hunting grounds, and why did those wild wolves mysteriously vanish? This could not possibly have been an accident, even though the emperor later executed several officials in charge of the hunting grounds. The former crown prince could never return. Later, the empress sent several more groups to investigate, and the conclusions they reached were largely the same as those of the Court of Judicial Review. During that time, she couldn't sleep night after night. As soon as she closed her eyes, she would see the crown prince's mangled and torn body. So tragic, so heartbreaking. The queen took a deep breath, her gaze cold and sorrowful as she looked at me. If you dare deceive me, you should know the consequences. I wasn't lying to her. This was something I had overheard by chance while my soul was wandering through the imperial harem. It's just that by the time I drifted over, the two people had already walked away. I looked back at the empress with a clear conscience. I inadvertently came across this secret. If your majesty does not believe me, you can send someone to search child. With a single sentence, I was firmly secured in the position of Empress Dowager. I knelt down to express my gratitude, and when I looked up at the empress, she gazed at me with a gentle smile, yet I could read a deeper meaning in her eyes. We were of one mind without prior consultation. We understood each other without a word spoken. The emperor was holding the little child, unable to put him down, when suddenly the child wrinkled his nose. Immediately after, a warm stream instantly landed on the emperor, soaking his dragon robe in an instant. Startled, I quickly had the wet nurse take the child away and was about to apologize when I heard the emperor burst into laughter. My grandson is so full of vigor even when peeing. He will surely become a pillar of the state in the future. I lowered my head in embarrassment, unable to see any connection between the two, and for a moment, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The empress smiled and asked the emperor to change his clothes, while she watched the wet nurse change the baby's diaper with a calm expression. I knew she didn't particularly like this child. After all, it carried the blood of the crown prince. It was just that my son and I were now tools for her revenge. She was a woman who clearly distinguished love from hate, which was why she allowed me to give birth to this child, just as I was thinking. The empress suddenly pressed the wet nurse's hand and exclaimed in surprise, "Wait." The wet nurse stood with her hands at her sides, unsure of what she had done wrong. I also stepped forward with suspicion, only to see the empress's gaze trembling as she carefully examined the baby's thigh. It turned out that on the inner side of his thigh, there was a crescent-shaped birthmark. If you don't look closely, you wouldn't notice at all. I saw her eyes filled with astonishment, tears gradually welling up, and couldn't help but softly call out, "Mother." She suddenly turned to look at me, tears instantly streaming down her face. Her trembling hand grabbed my wrist, her voice choked and urgent. "UWN, this child's birthmark, it's exactly the same as the crown prince's." Since Jiang Yuerong was confined to the cold palace, the crown prince seemed to have realized something. He no longer went to plead with the emperor, nor did he bribe servants to take care of her in the cold palace. Instead, he took the initiative to come to the empress's palace to see me. At first, the empress did not allow him to enter, using the excuse that I had not yet finished my postpartum confinement. It wasn't until the child's full moon banquet that we finally met at the feast. In just over a month, the crown prince seemed to have aged 10 years, looking utterly haggard. When he saw me, the gloom in his eyes vanished in an instant. I couldn't tell if it was an act or if he truly regretted it. He took my hand, his eyes filled with concern and care. "Yuan, how have you been all this time? I tried to visit you several times, but the Empress Dowager stopped me at the door. I missed you so much, and I feel so guilty. Yuan, I shouldn't have treated you like that before." He gritted his teeth bitterly. "I was deceived by that woman Jiang Yuerong. She is clearly a demoness and gave birth to that ominous creature, yet she used my hand to harm you. Fortunately, Mother Empress arrived in time that day, preventing me from making a grave mistake." By the end of his words, his voice was nearly choked with sobs.
I listened to his account with indifferent eyes, my heart as calm as stagnant water. If it were in my past life, I would have surely wept and thrown myself into his embrace, because I trust him, and I love him even more. But after experiencing such a painful past, if I were to be deceived by his sweet words again, that would truly be foolish. However, I did not expose him, because he still had one last bit of value. I picked up the wine prepared for me by the Empress, poured it into 2 cups, handed one to him, and pretended to be considerate as I said, "Crown Prince, let bygones be bygones. From now on, may we, as husband and wife, be of one heart, with no more misunderstandings between us." The Crown Prince's eyes flickered, seemingly moved by my words. He nodded, took the wine cup from my hand without hesitation, and downed it in one gulp. I watched his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed, narrowing my eyes slightly. How I wished to take a dagger, slit his throat, and watch him writhe in agony as he died before me. But I cannot. I want to watch him slowly die, then quietly leave this world. 3 years later, the Crown Prince passed away due to illness, and the entire nation mourned. Looking at his appearance, already ravaged by illness to the point where he no longer resembled a human nor a ghost, my heart remained utterly calm. Since my son's full moon celebration, the Crown Prince and I have reconciled as if nothing had ever come between us. He often joins me in admiring flowers, sharing wine, savoring tea, and playing chess, just as we did during the first 3 years after our wedding. Back then, there was no Jiang Yuerong, no Crown Prince, and certainly no stillborn child. There was only my wishful thinking and his feigned affection, so at that time, I was happy. But after these 3 years together, my state of mind is no longer what it once was. On the surface, I still treat him with the utmost respect and affection, even personally brewing soups and warming wine for him, then shyly feeding him mouthful by mouthful. Yet in reality, every bowl of soup, every cup of wine, every pot of tea, all of it contained the poison the Empress had given me. The poison was colorless and odorless, undetectable even by a silver needle, yet it could gradually drain a person's vitality, hollowing them out from within. He had also summoned imperial physicians, but the Imperial Medical Bureau was now aligned with the Empress's faction, who would tell him the truth. On the day his life was fading like a dying lamp, I sat by his bedside, gazing down at his ashen face, and softly asked him, "Crown Prince, these 3 years, wasn't it exhausting to keep up the act?" A faint glimmer of light suddenly flashed in his turbid eyes. He slowly turned his head, his gaze fixed on my face. "Because I gave birth to the legitimate eldest son, the Emperor named my son the future Crown Prince, and the Empress also regards me differently. But what about you? All your wings have been clipped. There is not a single trustworthy person left in this deep palace. You can only stand with me, hoping that I will remember our marital affection and still cherish your goodness, so that you won't be left utterly alone." With every word I spoke, the fear in his eyes grew. I suddenly laughed. "Not only are you tired of pretending, but I'm also exhausted." The Crown Prince's gaze finally rippled, as if he understood everything. His pale lips trembled, his voice like a broken wind. "Do you hate me? Of course. I wish I could kill you with my own hands. Indeed, indeed." The Crown Prince actually laughed as well, his laughter sounding like a ghost's wail. I, however, breathed a sigh of relief. "Let me tell you, for the past 3 years, every sip of tea, every drop of wine, and even every mouthful of soup you've consumed has been laced with something meant to kill you. We wanted to watch you suffer from illness, slowly approaching death. After you die, we will throw your corpse into the royal hunting grounds, letting the wild wolves gnaw away at your flesh and bones bit by bit, just like the Crown Prince back then." The Crown Prince widened his eyes in terror, all his confusion instantly resolved in that moment. No wonder I dared to frame him right within the Imperial Palace. No wonder I could make the entire Imperial Medical Bureau keep their mouths shut and cooperate with me. I curled my lips into a cold smile and delivered the final blow. "The Empress has long known about your plot to frame the former Crown Prince. The poison that will send you on your way was also a gift from her." "Impossible, impossible." The Crown Prince kept repeating these words until his voice choked off and he suddenly fell still, watching him die with eyes wide open. My heart finally settled slowly, sinking deep into the abyss of my chest. After the Crown Prince's death, my son was directly established as the heir apparent. Because of the birthmark on his leg, the Empress believed he was the reincarnation of her own son, so she treated the little one with exceptional kindness. His prosperity and glory in this life were thus secured. The last time I went to the cold palace, Jiang Yuerong was lying weakly curled up on the wooden plank bed. She was filthy and foul-smelling, her eyes vacant, fixed on a point in the void. I walked up to her, looking down at her from above, after a long moment. Jiang Yuerong finally noticed someone had arrived. She scrambled to her feet, then dropped to her knees before me without a shred of dignity, clutching tightly at the hem of my skirt. "Your Majesty, save me, Your Majesty, save me. There are so many strange things here. Please take me away." She looked up at me in panic, clearly not recognizing who I was. Seeing the madness in her eyes, I suddenly remembered she had long gone insane. Ever since she was confined to the cold palace, I had ordered various methods to torment her mind: poisonous insects, rats, and ants during the day, a female ghost in a blood-stained dress at midnight, the constant sound of dripping water. There are many, many more. The methods of torture in the harem are countless. All of them can completely destroy a person without leaving any visible injuries. She went from arrogantly banging on the door and demanding to be let out, to later being frightened out of her wits at the slightest sound. It had only been 3 years. I pulled a small bottle from my sleeve and tossed it to her. "Drink it, and you'll be able to leave." Jiang Yuerong's eyes were filled with excitement as she hastily picked up the bottle, pulled out the stopper, and drank it all down without a second thought. Watching her wide-mouthed, frantic attempt to pour every last drop of the poison into her mouth, I suddenly felt it was all so pointless. I turned around, pushed open the door of the cold palace, and slowly walked out. Jiang Yuerong scrambled to follow me out, but before her foot could cross the threshold, she suddenly clutched her stomach and fell to her knees. Blood trickled from her 7 orifices, a mournful cry escaped her throat, and she finally collapsed in the cold palace.